We'd like to welcome all of you here tonight. It's not often that we have a mostly full room for our work session. We are grateful you're here with us tonight to talk about our Bountiful Fiber. We'd like to begin this open house by having a presentation by our city manager, Gary Hill. And then after his presentation, we'll have a more mingling question and answer portion prior to the 7 o'clock city council meeting. So we'd just like to welcome Gary in his presentation now. Maybe I should clarify, my name is Jesse Bell. I'm a council member asked by our mayor who's out of town. I'd like to excuse her, and she's asked that I serve as mayor pro tem tonight.
Well, we do appreciate everyone being here. It's nice to have a turnout, and it's funny, we've been talking about this fiber issue for a long time now. We'll get into the history of it a little bit, but really it started in 2000 when during the COVID epidemic, we all realized how important being able to do things from our homes was. We had 5 kids at our home trying to do work online, and we quickly became aware of the limits of our own connectivity. And so at about that period in time, we had a lot of residents begin to petition the city to do something in order to be able to provide better service and better connectivity through all the community. We have a couple of incumbent service providers. I think, as everyone knows, we have Comcast and CenturyLink in town. And shortly after we began this discussion, members of the council and staff reached out to the incumbent providers, CenturyLink and Comcast, and asked if they would share what their expansion plans were, if they would share their data maps, their speeds. We hit a pretty big stone wall with that. There was basically no response, no action taken. And so I think it was about that point that the city council got serious about trying to do something to provide high-speed internet to all of the community. Tonight, what I'd like to do, and we're just gonna spend about 15, 20 minutes max with a little presentation about some of the history and data is the first section, including why we're doing this in the first place, what the costs are, what the cost to residents will be, and then a few minutes at the end of the presentation about what's going on with the petitions that are going around town. We've had a lot of questions about that, and we'd like to provide some information to the best of our knowledge about that as well. And then following that, as Jesse mentioned, Councilmember Bell mentioned, then we'll just break up. We have members of the city council, members of city staff, we have representatives from Utopia, we have even some of our potential internet service providers that currently can't do business in town but would like to be on our network that could answer questions for residents. So basically, why? Why are we building a fiber optic network? And I mentioned the genesis of this was in 2020, really when we began to think about it seriously, but it's to be able to provide high-speed internet to every place in the community, not just certain neighborhoods, which is the current situation. Our current providers, they only go to certain areas. I happen to be right now at the very end of one line. We feel fortunate that we were able to do that, but houses across the street don't have it. Bountiful Fiber, our intention is to provide an open network. So that means any ISP that wants to be on our network can be on it, promoting competition. So you could go with Sumo, you could go with Xmission, you could go with whoever it ends up signing up to be on our ISP. And participation is 100% optional. It'll all be paid for with subscriber fees. Nobody has to participate that doesn't want to. Anybody can continue with Comcast or CenturyLink or Skylink or any other version of internet connectivity that you currently have. So completely voluntary participation. We did a resident survey in 2021 to find out what the demand was and what people's interests were. And some of the key findings of that survey were first that speed and reliability were people's first needs when it comes to internet. And I know some of you have dealt with this. I know our city council members have lots of stories about their own internet and its reliability. Second was that at least a third and up to half of residents aren't satisfied with their current service providers. And that 60% of citizens in Bountiful, if all things were equal, would prefer to work with a city-owned network as opposed to someone else. And I think that's a testament to the years and years of Bountiful making good decisions with power, some of our other utilities. Based on this study that was done, it provided that 43% of homes and businesses would subscribe if they had the opportunity. That was, a couple of years ago. So what is Bountiful Fiber? It's a fiber optic network owned by Bountiful City. After years of study and doing a competitive request for proposals, we decided to partner with Utopia Fiber, who's a very well-known entity, especially with regards to reliability. They're owned by other cities, to build our network and to operate it for at least the contract period's 10 years. If at some point in the future, Bountiful and our residents decided we wanted to operate our own system, we'd be free to do that. Subscribers to our network will be able to provide an internet connection between 250 megabits and 10 gigabits, which is a lot. And again, it's all voluntary. I was trying to think how to visually describe how much time we've spent on this. The summary is on the left. We started talking about this over 3 years ago. We've had 24 public meetings where this has been discussed. And I imagine there are some people listening, or maybe even here, like, I haven't heard anything about this. But for those of us who've been in the middle of it, it's felt like a lifetime a little bit. We have spent a lot of time trying to decide what is in the best interest of Bountiful. Is it to be in the business at all? If it is, what's the model? Do we own it? What are the risks of owning it? What are the rewards? The council spent countless hours, poured over hundreds of pages of responses from potential providers to get to a decision. This included a 6-month feasibility study by Magellan, the residents survey, and then, as I mentioned, a formal request for proposals. After all of that, which was completed in December last year, the council gave us direction to begin to negotiate with Utopia Fiber to try and provide the best possible partnership for Bountiful, which would be a Bountiful-owned but Utopia-operated system. It took us 5 months. Roger Timmerman, who's the executive director of Utopia Fiber, is here, and it was a good 5 months, but we feel really good about the process, and we're very happy with what we came up with. The last meeting where this was all decided was June 27th. We were pretty excited, and on May of 2023, we signed the contract. We thought we were ready to go and get moving. Now, how will the project be paid for? A lot of potential misinformation about this, and I will try and be as clear and as succinct as I can. All of this has been discussed in prior meetings, but the city will borrow between $42 and $47 million. The $47 million amount that has been shared with residents by petitioners or online, that's what we call a parameter. It's a maximum amount. We may not bond more than that. It turns out that based on interest rates and the city's credit rating, which we received for this bond yesterday, actually, it's a AA plus credit rating for those who aren't geeky enough to know what that means. That's a really good credit score. AAA is the highest credit score that a taxing entity can get. This is one step below it, basically because our population is less than 50,000. That's a higher credit rating than, I used to work for Park City years ago. It's a higher credit rating than Park City can ever achieve. Bountiful has great financial management, and that all helps translate into lower interest rates for this. So we will probably end up bonding for about $43 million is what we expect. And subscriber revenue is going to pay for the project, not taxes. We are using sales tax as a pledge to get the best interest rate. It's basically our security for the bonds. We cannot, by state law, increase property tax. So there will be no property tax increase. It's not allowed. It's simply a pledge of those revenues. The follow-up question we get a lot is then, okay, well, how many people have to subscribe to the network to make it self-funding, right? What if we don't? What if not enough people sign up? We've done lots and lots of research on this and lots of analysis. The number for Bountiful is a 35% take rate. That's about 6,500 residents out of a possible 18,740 connections. So how likely is that? Well, if you look at the chart on your right, you can see these are the other Utopia and UIA cities, and you can see what their take rates are as of the end of June. And I won't go through all of them, but I've highlighted Centerville, which is probably the most similar city demographically to us. You could make an argument that Woodland Hills is, or Layton. But the average of all of those communities is 39%, if that's the average of those that have more than 3 years' experience. One thing you would notice if we put the data up there, and you can look at it a little bit, is those cities that have joined more recently since Utopia and UIA have a different model of build-out, which is basically they start the city and they finish the city. They don't move from city to city. You can say they have much higher take rates. So how comfortable are we that we can achieve 35%? Pretty darn comfortable. Is there no risk? No, there's no venture that doesn't have any risk, but we're very comfortable that we're going to achieve 35% take rate and achieve it very quickly. That red bullet point is critical for understanding what we're trying to do and why the council's willing to take the risk. All new bonds issued by Utopia / UIA, that's a branch of Utopia to help finance fiber projects, since 2009 have been paid solely with subscriber revenues. So all of those cities, all of those bonds that have been issued, none of them have used tax money to have to repay the debt service. Again, how comfortable are we that we're going to be able to do this like we're anticipating? Pretty comfortable. Even if we don't achieve the 35% take rate right away, it literally is just a matter of time. Once we do, those revenues will be paid back. So how much will, I want to make sure I didn't skip one there. I might be coming back to it. Yeah, there's another slide in a minute. How much will Bountiful Fiber cost a participant, a customer? 250 meg is $70 to $78 a month, depending upon which ISP you pick. 1 gig is 80 to 90, 10 gigs is more for a lot more. There are no installation fees. There is no connection fee or disconnection fee. There are no contracts. You can sign up 1 month, drop it the next month. So there was a slide back there that I skipped over or I accidentally deleted, which is what happens if we don't get our take rate? And I wanted to highlight this. That's the natural question. Well, what happens in the worst case scenario, Bountiful does not get to 35%? What do we do? How do we pay for the debt service? The answer to that is we use general fund revenues until we get to 35%, and then we repay the general fund. So I think there have been comments by some, including the Utah Taxpayers Association, that Bountiful is not being honest, that we're saying that no taxes will be involved. We're absolutely pledging our sales tax. And we recognize and discuss that if the take rates aren't met for a period of time, there will be a subsidy from the general fund. But the models show, and we're confident that as soon as we reach 35%, then we begin to pay ourselves back at no tax rate increase to residents of any kind. So what officially should happen now is we're basically ready to go. We have been negotiating and working with Utopia. We've been engineering the project. Construction was scheduled to start this month. In our agreement, we were supposed to issue bonds by the middle of July, and that would have basically allowed us to go, and construction is anticipated to take 24 to 36 months for the entire city, with neighborhoods coming on a bit at a time as fiber gets to them. That was our plan until we found out about 3 weeks ago. This is now switching to the second part of the conversation. About 3 weeks ago that people were out collecting signatures to force the bond onto the ballot. And we didn't know who it was. Nobody stepped forward. It became clear it was not initiated by Bountiful residents. If it's a resident referendum, they have to come in, they have to sign a petition, have to be 5 Bountiful registered voters. None of that took place. We didn't know who was behind it till we started asking questions, and it wasn't really until our mayor and a council member reached out to the president of the Utah Taxpayers Association, probably a week after the effort started, that he admitted that they were behind this effort. They had hired a company called Gather, which is a signature gathering company, to come into Bountiful and to collect enough signatures, 20% of registered voters, to force this onto a ballot. And if any of you have had them come to your house, you've probably had a variety of messages that they've given to you. We're going to share some of those in just a minute. But the goal of the Taxpayers Association is very clear. They said it themselves. It is basically to kill Bountiful Fiber. They did the same thing in Kaysville 2 years ago. After they got that on the ballot, they spent, I don't know how much money on a very large campaign to convince voters to vote down the bond that Kaysville would have done for their own fiber network. And you can read it in their own words. For the last 20 years, the Taxpayers Association has maintained this simple position. When it comes to government-owned fiber networks, government should not be in the business of business. And I think our city council agreed with that for a long, long time until it became apparent that private sector was simply not going to serve our residents. And so the council chose to step in. So, as I mentioned, it's the Taxpayers Association. I've been aware of the Taxpayers Association for a long time. It's a great name. It sounds super. When we tried to find out more about them, they provide no information on their website. They do not publish who their members are. They don't publish who their board of directors is. We still don't know. We did find out and do know that CenturyLink and Lumen, Comcast, are members and have paid for their conferences or helped pay for their conferences the last couple of years. That they have contracted with this company, Gather, to send people who are also not residents of Bountiful around to collect signatures to put it on the ballot. So question, does state law require voter approval of sales tax bond, and why not? I mean, the residents all voted recently on a property tax bond, a general obligation bond, not too long ago, to be able to build some trails and a new park. Why not a sales tax bond? Why is it not required? And the short answer is that a general obligation bond creates a property tax liability and increase. A sales tax bond does not. There is no tax increase that comes with a sales tax bond. So what do we know about the Taxpayers Association? We know that they're vocal critics of Utopia Fiber and have been for a long, long time. You could Google that and find lots of quotes. Their president has spoken in our prior meetings against our fiber project. As I mentioned, we don't really know more about them than that, other than they lobby a lot, ostensibly on the behalf of taxpayers, but it seems, to be honest, like it's more for corporate taxpayers than it is for individual taxpayers. Comcast and CenturyLink have been sponsors and members of the organization as recently as 2020, and we know that they are members now too. So what about this signature gathering company? Just, if I may, by a show of hands, how many people here have had the signature gatherers come to your house? Okay, so roughly half, maybe a little more than half. This was a company created to gather signatures for candidates or for referenda and initiative. We tried to find information about them, and we could not. They do not have a website. They don't have a publicly listed phone number. We found out who their owners were, and then we tried to search a little bit more about what their business was about.
How many people actually signed it? See if we get the same group.
A few people, okay. A small number of people signed it. So is it legal to hire someone from outside your community to come in and collect signatures? Absolutely, totally legal. It's a gathering, it's a common practice. You can see that what we did find is some advertisements from Gather to hire people to do a variety of different signature gathering initiatives, sending people out of state. Our Bountiful one is mentioned in that first on the upper left hand. They provide bonuses for employees and things like that based upon their performance. Seems like a decent summer job. The challenge has been, however, is that we are aware through many conversations, many texts, affidavits, and some video evidence that the gatherers have not been forthcoming or honest with our residents. And that's very frustrating. I can just tell you from my perspective, it's challenging to distill even into 20 minutes what we've been studying for 3 years. I don't know how anybody could possibly do it, especially when their intent is not to encourage you to their intent is only to get your signature. They don't care about whether or not you have the facts. I wanted to show this video of one of our residents who sent us in a video after they learned they'd kind of been duped, and just watch the words that the petition gatherer who's wearing the white shirt had to say. And hopefully I can get this to work. It's subtitled because it's kind of faint.
So what that means is they're going to spend $47 million in a thing to do fiber optic internet traffic. So what we're trying to do is just get enough signatures so that we can put it on the ballot so that all of us can vote yes for it as well.
Okay.
So is that something you're interested in doing?
Sure.
Okay, great. And once we bring these signatures into Bountiful City, what they're going to do is they should release all the information about it. As soon as they have the information about setup and things like that, the information should be relayed to.
What we're trying to do is just get enough signatures so that we can put it on the ballot, so all of us can vote yes for it as well. It's supremely frustrating to have that kind of disingenuous dishonesty, really, said. These are some of the other quotes we've received from people. They told me they represented Bountiful City. They said it's going to cost the taxpayers a lot of money. They said if we were for fiber, we should sign the petition. He right off the bat said that he was asked by the city council to go around. They told me that a decision had not yet been made. They said this was the way to get fiber in Bountiful. And maybe my favorite one I heard just about 15 minutes ago from one of our police lieutenants who had them come to his door just shortly before that, said that they were with Gather and they were representing the Utah State Tax Commission. It's one thing, I think, to go through this process, and if people legitimately feel like this should be on the November ballot, then by all means, sign the petition, go that way. But if you were led to believe that this was the way to get fiber to Bountiful, I'm afraid you've been misled. It's not necessary. The intention of the signature gatherers is simply to stop Bountiful fiber. That's their whole goal. I can't say it any more clearly than that. We've been asked the question by some, well, what does it really matter? What if we wait? Why can't we just wait till November, see what residents want to do? There will be no problem. Well, first, there's always the risk. It's challenging to educate, 40,000 residents again for what has been studied by a group of individuals for 3 years in detail. Even if the petition it was successful on the November ballot, there are several problems that we're going to have to address. The first is we were supposed to have financing done by July. We'll have missed that deadline. We'll have to amend our contract. Interest rates, we know, continue to go up. The longer we wait, the higher the interest rates, which means the higher customer rates will be for the fiber program. Time is a major consideration. We intended to start construction now. We have not stopped the design up to this point, but we'll have to wait and see what happens once the signatures come in and have to make a decision as a city. If we wait till November with the ballot canvas in December, if you remember the election is now a little bit later, we will have lost an entire construction season. And that adds to cost. And I have to say, in Utopia's credit, remember, they gave us a bid for this project last December. They have kept those costs constant for us while we negotiated for 5 months. And if we delay the project, it's not reasonable that Utopia would not want to also pass those additional costs on. They purchased equipment and things for some fiber project. We're first in line, but if we get delayed, somebody else gets in line, it will end up costing all of us more money, which is a frustration. So there is real impact in cost to the customer if we wait until November. And then finally, before we conclude the presentation and make ourselves available for answers and questions, people have asked, how can I remove my name if I already signed the petition? We have a request to remove your name from the petition form. Our city recorder, Sean Andrus, is sitting back by the back wall. If you're interested in taking your name off the petition, she can help you with that. Again, if you believe in your heart of hearts that the city residents should vote on this, then we're not telling you not to. Please keep your name on the petition. But if you were misled, like many, there is an option to take your name off the petition. With that, I'm going to end this portion of the meeting. I'd just like to maybe have our council members who are sitting up here, they're all available and ready to answer questions. Our city engineer, Lloyd Sheeney, city attorney, Clint Drake. We have our assistant city manager, Galen Rasmussen, our finance director, Tyson Beck. Roger Timmerman from Utopia is here to answer questions. I think we even have some potential internet service providers here. Sumo is back here, a couple of Bountiful residents. If you have questions about what the ISP side might look like. But with that, we'll end that, and then feel free to stand up, walk around, come ask us any questions you have. We appreciate you being here. Our city council meeting begins at 7, so we'll have about 25 minutes for Q&A here. There is a public hearing on the bond shortly after the meeting starts that you're welcome to stick around for too. Thank you very much for being here tonight.